Hey everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. We're going to talk about coaching natural athletes, specifically our coaches failing them. And Adam, I remember 10 or 15 years ago, I almost had the reverse type of thought because so many people would ask me, Joe, do you coach enhanced athletes? For the first 20 years of my coaching career, I pretty much stayed inside the INBF and WNBF. There weren't even a lot of natural organizations that were crossing paths with us. So in that amount of time, I had already amassed more than 400 pro cards, 150 pro titles, 50 world championship wins. And even though I had worked with a handful of NPC competitors and even a couple Olympia competitors and IFBB pros, I would still get that question. And I had to really think through, can I translate what I feel like I have perfected specifically to the physiological nuances of the way we were bringing real physiology into the sport over to people using PEDs because a lot of their natural questions were, are there metabolic differences? Obviously, there are anabolic differences. And with that and the timing of cycling different doses, what about water retention? Maybe I can't use your methodology of staying hydrated. Maybe I have to dehydrate. So there are a lot of things that people just didn't understand and didn't trust. But now you are asking the question specifically, this was your topic, are coaches so far into the realm of just normalization of PED use that they don't know how to treat natural athletes? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, a couple different perspectives here. One, coaches who are really pushing athletes to use right away before we even see what their natural potential is. Two, exactly what you said, where, our coaches not understanding physiology as well, and now they're enhancing athletes to make up for what they don't know. And then just third, we've got to mention another person died from DNP actually a couple weeks ago, which I'll say I never usually speak in absolutes, but if your coach tells you to do that, run. For sure. That's like the one compound that no one should be using for bodybuilding purposes, hopefully. So yeah, I do think that a lot of coaches are falling short in this capacity for both of those reasons.
Okay, so before we go on, now we have to kind of like screech the brakes here and go back to your little sidebar. Explain that compound and what the ramifications were and why that's different or novel to the people who have been killed by coaches in our sport so far.
Yeah, it's extremely unregulated and it's a supplement, well, it's a drug that helps you lose body fat, but it actually increases body temperature. So if you take too much, you over overheat, bake, and die. And also too, like, so it's really dose dependent. There's not a whole lot of research on, how bodybuilders should be using it. And just for me, because I've had two athletes in my entire time frame of 20 over 2 decades of coaching ever ask me if they could use it, and my answer was no. And my rebuttal always was, when you bring something like that into your house, and it's in, you put it in pill form eventually, what if someone takes something like it's like worse than having a firearm in your house. It's super dangerous. You could drop it, your dog could eat it. Like there's a lot of stuff that could go bad with having this even in your possession, I feel like. So I told my clients absolutely not, you know.
Right, right. Well, that even kind of leads us into some of the tangential parts of PED use, away from just anabolic compounds, but people who are using Lasix or other strong diuretics, people who are compounding that with practices such as dehydration or mineral manipulation, things that decrease blood pressure so rapidly that they just go into heart failure. Um, When we look at the typical coach that you're describing who may not know how to specifically help and assert their skills with natural athletes, what do you think you would highlight with natural athletes that are different? Here's their physiological specialization that is just different than somebody used to using even small amounts of anabolics.
hmm I think one time, it is going to take you longer, and we battle this anyhow, even with not enhanced and enhanced athletes. People are trying to do contest preps way, way, way too quickly. I still to this day hear preps of 12 to 16 weeks, and if you want to come up short on conditioning and try doing that without PEDs, that's, and a lot of people just don't highlight, well, 16 weeks with PEDs or 16 weeks without. So I think that's one of the major nuances that I'm seeing is the timeline of the prep. Um, the other major thing that I'm seeing is the lack of focus on recovery aspect. So, you can really beat it into the ground if someone's on a lot of compounds, they are going to recover faster. That's one of the reasons people take anabolic steroids in the first place. So the lack of having people recover. I just had a lady come to me and her coach had her doing 7 days a week of cardio, 7 days a week training. And I just thought, wow, how can you keep up with that much? And she was a drug-free athlete. And I thought even with the lengths of the cardio being, close to 3 hours on top of hard training and a ton of volume, I was just like, wow, you're gonna have to sacrifice pretty much everything to do these workouts, not even having a day off from it. Her meal preps were becoming difficult because she's like, I barely have time to meal prep. I'm doing cardio and training so much. The great thing about that is I know I have a client who'll do absolutely anything, to get the job done. And I think there is something that needs to be said about that. But you definitely have to keep the recovery modalities in.
Mhm. Let me just summarize those 2 points because those are the exact two I would have brought up as well, and I want to see if I can add anything else to that part of the conversation. Number one, the time factor. A mistake I made early on when I started coaching more enhanced athletes was simply thinking that testosterone or other androgenic compounds would speed up metabolism. And to my surprise, it almost does the opposite. You're so anabolic, you can't reach those catabolic states to lose body fat like you might think. What people using PEDs can do is tolerate harsher drops in calories, and still retain muscle. I think the hunger can be just as great, and so they can crash and burn, so to speak, when it comes to just hitting a wall with energy and depletion and so forth. So even with an enhanced athlete, you have to be careful there. But for the drug-free athlete, you absolutely can push them too far and just strip a lot of fullness and size away. You can deaminate muscle tissue to the point they're getting super, super stringy because they think they can diet as hard and they hear some numbers like, people losing 2 or 3 pounds a week on the using side, and that's just not going to happen for them. On the recovery, interesting anecdote with more women, even in the general population, using small amounts of TRT for just general hormone replacement therapy through perimenopause. A lot of women are just, finding they do recover better, even just in terms of how they feel, not specifically just soreness and so forth, and when they can train a body part again. But I met with a woman this week who is doing just the lowest dose you can take of even an estrogen progesterone compound for menopausal symptoms. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm sleeping so much better. I'm feeling so much more rested and better during the day and so forth." So recovery is definitely going to be a big thing, and just making sure you're not cramping too many training sessions in a week is a factor. I'm trying to think, is there anything else specific to natural athletes that a coach would miss?
I think one of the bigger things for, natural athletes that you're not going to get with enhanced is, the ability to take fat burners and things like T3 and Clen to speed up the process. And I think when these coaches work with a majority of enhanced athletes, they don't have that ace in the hole for pretty much maximal fat loss. Like you were saying, those time periods can be shortened quite a bit with an enhanced athlete. So just not having those tools at the disposal. And the fourth thing that I would say I would mention is with enhanced athletes, you may have the ability to have someone that's a little bit more hypermuscular in the division. The peaking process, and this is something we talk about a lot, you know, relying on, drugs for peaking, for fullness, and maybe using some compounds that are great for fullness, but then at the same time cutting water. So how much better could this athlete have looked had they kept water in, which flattens the muscle, but then they've got a large surge of anabolics in the peak week process, which is keeping them full. So you're really drug peaking versus, food and water manipulation for peaking, which is only half of the process.
Yeah, and the other thing, it's funny, great that you went over that direction on the peaking side after talking about dieting. Um, I would even say that natural athletes are going to see changes a little bit more rapidly, especially on contest day. If you've got them to a place where they're almost completely full, glycogen loaded, you've done some kind of a linear or progressive linear load, then meal to meal, they're going to show either small amounts of spillover or fullness. They're getting close to that top edge. And then as they're coming back down, they could be seeing quicker reductions. I think that's where somebody using could just not quite see that much of a fluctuation, with the levels of food they may be eating, the fact that they may have gotten a little bit leaner, a little bit easier, that could be a factor. But once again, I think that almost goes back to people's individual body types. When I peak competitors who are using, if everything is stable in terms of what they have been using and how they've cycled themselves to at least be stable for those last couple of weeks, I really just don't see that many overall differences that are apart from their phenotype. If they have a really fast metabolism or slow metabolism, that's going to maintain itself in either camp.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're always working with the genetics of the person. And I've had people I've peaked where I felt like they were like hyper responders, and you saw, a lot more muscle fullness versus someone else. And, these are people who I've peaked multiple times. And maybe, we've test peaked and had a spill. So we knew we were as maximally full as they could get. Um, Also, too, I think sometimes it just comes down to the biome and how they're digesting stuff too. And I think sometimes, that typically the gut microbiome gets affected by the drugs quite a bit. And I think that is one of the reasons we kind of see that, because I see that too, where my enhanced athletes don't get a difference in fullness like my natural athletes get. And I think a lot of the oral compounds really do affect the microbiome, which, gives you a slight amount of malabsorption to a degree.
And as I was stumbling around there a minute ago, not being very effective explaining the difference between enhanced and natural in terms of peak week, you describing the biome made me think that it's also a part of when I expressed how an enhanced athlete may be able to hold fullness a little bit better with more stability. It's also just because of that anabolic environment where they're kind of always in that growth cycle. They're just kind of nudging up against that line where the natural person is just metabolically kind of burning through calories without that support. And yes, I had not considered the biome. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. I do want to circle back before we stop into what you said initially, which is, maybe some coaches just consider it so normal for use that they push PEDs onto clients who don't have much experience. They haven't really seen what their genetic potential is. And I was doing a couple interviews in the last month where that topic came up, in that it's just such a normalized process where even a brand new competitor, let's say a female going into bikini, first contest ever, and she'll be talking to a coach who just says, "Oh yeah, he's giving me Anavar, he's doing this for me, he's doing that," as if that's just the rite of passage, as if there was no consequential decision-making process. It's just what you do. And I think that is going to definitely create some regret in some people.
I agree. I think that's where coaching really comes, you know, in play. People miss the mark a lot on, actually taking the time to get to know somebody and actually even just do an initial consult. And I actually had a consult the other day where the client was like, this coach immediately just told me I'm not going to be competitive unless I do drugs. And she said, well, who said I really wanted to be competitive? This is kind of to give me a weight loss goal. She said, I've heard about these natural shows. What about that?
Mhm.
And, it's funny, even coaches in our own industry like are almost ignoring the natural stuff. But you get that even in Gen Pop fitness. I had someone inquire with me and she chose me over the coach who's, you know, said, I have this many IFBB pro cards. And she's like, I don't care about pro cards. I'm just trying to lose weight.
Yeah. Well, I see, and this will be my last topic here, a lot of men and women who are hitting their 50s and even 60s, and maybe they have been natural athletes and competitors their entire lives. And because of just normal health concerns and longevity, they are doing some HRT work, and now they're disqualified from competing in those drug-free organizations. And so they then have to make the decision. And typically it goes like this. Well, let me just see how it goes. Like, I'm doing this for my health. So I'll switch over to the NPC. And, maybe they do well, maybe they don't. But now the doorway's open. And it's like, next time, maybe I'll do just a little more. Next time, just a little more. Maybe I'll add this. Maybe I'll add that. So I will certainly go on the record as saying I am having those conversations with people. If for your health, if you're going to go down a hormone replacement route, yes, now your options are limited to these contests, but I still would want you to consider your ultimate goal. Is it just to win? Is it more size at risks you might not be anticipating? Or are you okay just having a playing field, where you can continue to compete? So I think a lot of people in that age bracket are facing those decisions now.
One thing that I tell people is whether it's HRT or, PEDs or anything, once you decide to take something, that is usually the largest step in that journey. And then once you start doing something, it's then a daily decision to not. And I think that really hits home for a lot of people. Once you start taking this, it will then become a daily decision not to, because you have. When you haven't done something before, it's easy to be a little bit more afraid or decide not to. And that goes with a lot of things in life, and being somebody who, has moved from Ohio to Vegas, I always said I'm not doing anything unless it's legal. I never to want to do anything that I can't obtain, legally. And that was always kind of the common denominator here. And Vegas is a town of a lot of illegal
I,
activities.
I was literally going to say, good thing you moved to Vegas with that principle.
Yeah.
Uh, well, in summary, guys, certainly if you are being coached or looking for a coach, you talk to them about their differences and different approaches in natural versus PED. Do they understand the differences? Do you feel comfortable with their experience in both different sides, in some of the similarities and differences? But thanks again for hanging out with us here. We'll see you next time in Contest Prep University. Those of you in our CPU D1 club, we'll see you in the private chat, and we'll have a good online live session here soon. See you guys.